All right, thank you all for joining us this July 5th after a long holiday weekend, and welcome to the monthly meeting of the Nevada County Coalition of Firewise Communities. I am your coalition chair, Scott Beasley, and we've got, as usual, a lot of information for you this month. So, agenda for this evening. We have welcome and partner reports. We will have a Rice's fire debrief. I'm sure that's why a lot of you are here, since that one's fresh in memory. That one is going to be led by Lieutenant Sean Scales, Nevada County Sheriff's Office, and I forget your exact title there, LT, in your relationship to OES, but also working with Office of Emergency Services. Hoping to have someone from CAL FIRE join us, but they could very well be still tied up with the mop-up effort. We'll see here in a minute. After that debrief, we'll take a couple questions and then move on to the education component tonight. So that fire, for many of us, was just a good test to see where we are at in our levels of preparation and how we can respond to our own homes. And you're going to get Susan Rogers from our Coalition Steering Committee to talk about what you should know during an actual emergency and where to get that data. And I'm really excited tonight. We've got Brian Snyder from Freed. He's their Emergency Services Coordinator. He's going to talk about disaster and access resources for seniors. And then we've got Caleb Dardick, the Assistant County Executive Officer, talking about emergency services priorities and sustainable funding. So we're excited about this opportunity that could potentially bring some funding. You know, our job at the coalition is to represent all of you and hear what your needs are. And, you know, very specifically, we're hearing from many of you that for the more seasoned communities that you've done the basic clearing, you've taught your community members about defensible space, you've done what you can. There's still a lot of big trees down, and there's bigger projects needed to protect the bigger community. And even within your own Firewise communities, there's just projects that can't be taken on by a handful of residents and their weed whippers. So we've got Caleb here tonight to talk about a potential funding mechanism for some of the much bigger projects in this community and what the future of Nevada County preparedness might look like. So we're excited for that. We'll then have an open forum, time dependent. And then for those of you who saw the original agenda, know that a couple of those speakers got bumped back to August. We will address what's going on with AB 38 in terms of wildfire and how it relates to insurance and real estate and what happens if you're selling your home. So we've got some people from both CAL FIRE and the Realtors Association to address that. So again, our mission, the coalition promotes fire safety through advocacy, education, and community involvement with other stakeholders interested in working toward stronger fire safety practices. And you are those stakeholders, so we appreciate you being here. With that, let's jump into some partner reports. I didn't see anyone, but do we have anyone from CAL FIRE here tonight to give a report? Out of silence. Let's go to Nevada County Consolidated, Patrick Mason.
Yeah, good evening. So with Nevada County Consolidated Fire District, we just wrapped up our July 4th task force last night. We've been out all weekend. We usually come on in the middle of the afternoon and hang out till 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, chasing down fireworks complaints. This year, it was fairly busy, but we did not have any fires that started from fireworks this year within the county. So just a reminder that they're all legal in Nevada County. You can't have them, but a lot of people coming in from out of town. And it was kind of a busy weekend. The saving grace, I think, last night was the fact that July 4th was on a Monday and everyone has to be at work on Tuesday. So we had a large exodus and clearing out of the campgrounds. Like Scotts Flat Lake yesterday was below 50% full for that. So overall, everything went off fairly well with that. Something else we got going on, our green waste bins, community yard waste bins, we got a grant for. We reopened the application. When we first developed this program, we got a quote from Waste Management about $1,000 a bin. It's a 40-yard green waste bin to dispose of it. And we're averaging about $500 per bin. So we're able to double our amount of bins. And the big thing with this program is that it's for community based. It's not individual property use. We try and clear along private roadways for evacuation. And if that's something you want to check out, you can go onto our website, nccfire.com, under the fire prevention tab. I'll go and throw that up in the notes. And put in an application. I'll come out, I'll kind of do a pre-inspection. And then once, if everything's accepted, we'll get a hold of Waste Management, drop a 40-yard bin out there for the community. You guys fill it up, get a hold of me, and we'll contact Waste Management, have them pick it up. And no cost to you at all to hopefully get rid of some of that vegetation, that dead and down stuff along those evacuation routes. And then the last thing I got from us is we do have a local government strike team out right now. Left at about midnight last night. 5 engines from the county went over to the Electra fire over in Amador, El Dorado. So we do have those 5 engines out, but everything here in home, all the fire districts are still staffed and fully operational. That's what I got.
All right, thanks for that update. Any news about more green waste opportunities is good. We are hearing constant demand for that, so we appreciate the work there. All right, Paul Cummings, Nevada County Office of Emergency Services.
Yeah, good evening, Scott, and good evening, everybody. A couple of quick updates. I just wanted to talk about defensible space. The Fire Marshal, Patrick Mason, just spoke, and Nevada County Consolidated is our partner in that program. Currently, we have 2 full-time defensible space inspectors and 2 part-time defensible space inspectors addressing the ongoing hazardous vegetation complaints that come in, and also working on the grant-related DSI work. I just wanted to throw that out there as we were going to head into the AB 38 conversation. That's not happening this week, but it'll happen next week. But just remind folks that we do have a strong team on the county side trying to address those concerns. Wanted to talk about some of the CAL FIRE grant funds that we got. I touched on these at the last meeting. I just wanted to refresh everybody that we did receive around $150,000 for a local evacuation study to take place, funded by CAL FIRE. So that's really exciting news. The Nevada County Board of Supervisors accepted those funds last week. And so over the next month, we'll be working to take that out to bid with a contractor who can then come in and work with us to do that study. So that'll be good. That'll create some of the data points to inform some of the things that you are all doing locally in your communities as we continue to build out our evacuation plans. I also wanted to touch on the CAL FIRE Woodpecker Ravine Shaded Fuel Break. That's about a 400-acre, $2.1 million grant. Again, the board accepted those funds, and we've finalized the maps for that project, and we hope to be going out to bid with a contractor for that in August as well. And that's really getting after key ridge tops and then key roadside vegetation reduction in the Woodpecker Ravine area.
Hey, Paul, sorry to cut you off. For those of us who aren't extra local or cartographers, where's Woodpecker Ravine?
South and east of Grass Valley. So I don't have a map to put up, but
yeah, just by landmark, is there a road or is there a place I drink beer near that you could give me as a landmark?
I'm gonna have to pull the map up myself to find some good beer drinking landmarks. I don't have any off the top of my head, but I think the people in those communities know who they are, and we've been getting a lot of the requests about the maps, and stand by. We'll have a website, a survey you can take where we'll start engaging you to keep you informed. But yeah, it's really meant to get after. I mean, Patrick Mason probably has a quick update on Woodpecker Ravine. Can you talk about why it's strategic, Pat, in 30 seconds or less?
Yeah, so Woodpecker Ravine actually starts in the South County, all the way down basically at Lake of the Pines. And it's a ravine that runs straight up from Lake of the Pines into the bottom side of, if it goes left, it comes up to Brewer Canyon, up into the bottom side of Alta Sierra. If it stays right, it goes up into the bottom side of Cedar Ridge, Paradise Chicago Park area. So it's a very long, steep ravine that covers that entire eastern side of that county.
And the challenge is if we get a fire in that canyon, it will lead the fire all the way to Grass Valley, right? And we don't want that. So it's important that we clear out strategic ridge tops and roadside 75 feet and 150 feet wide evacuation swaths through there. We want to get more funding to deepen that clearing, but this is what we've got right now. Last thing I wanted to thank you, Pat. That was great. Last thing I wanted to touch on is that we're bringing on the county coordinator. Her name is Alessandra Zambrano. I think I've talked to this group in the Fire Safe Council about her before. She starts Monday. Very qualified gal, master's degree in forestry. She's got experience writing community wildfire protection plans. And so she's going to be filling the role of county coordinator, which is new to this community. But this person is really going to be working in OES and getting out there to meet all of you and figure out what it is you're doing, what projects are important to you, and then how do we take what you're doing in your communities and then integrate them with the bigger things that we're doing and some of the other players so that we can find efficiencies and collaboration on a lot of the different wildfire mitigation things that we're doing in our community. So that's really exciting. Some of you have already heard from Barbara Teagues, who was trying to get your contact information so that when the county coordinator came along, she could then plug in. So that's going to start happening in the next couple of weeks. So stand by. And when you hear from her, she works for OES. And so that's the end of my update, Scott.
Appreciate it, Paul. And yeah, Paul and Patrick, thanks so much for explaining the strategic significance of that Woodpecker Ravine project. I think many of us, we hear the names of these things, but we don't understand fire behavior and geography like you guys do. So that was very helpful. I appreciate it. Up next, I saw Don Thane on here. I don't know, Don or Jamie Jones. Anyone from Nevada County Fire Safe Council have an update?
Yeah, I'm on. Jamie's also on, but I guess my couple of points is we had a successful red zone event weekend before last. We had probably about 150 people attending. It was a successful event, being that it was the fourth time we've tried to pull this one off. And next year we'll probably do it again. We're still talking about it, but I would really like the Firewise communities to be more involved with this event. And I think we could focus more on the Firewise communities with this event next year. So I just wanted to kind of plant that seed from a Fire Safe Council perspective. Jamie, do you have anything else to report out?
I do. Jamie Jones, Executive Director of Fire Safe Council. I have a few items. Really just want to piggyback on some of the grant awards. We did receive a chipping and green waste grant award from CAL FIRE for $1.5 million in this last round. And so we'll be eager to get that started and hopefully rolling out this fall for the community. Secondly, we had 5 staff members at Fire Safe Council complete the DSI inspector training. It's the new CAL FIRE pilot program. And so now we'll have five certified inspectors to do DSI inspections, as well as I'll be attending the instructor training to be able to be an instructor for the State Fire Marshal's office on that. Thirdly, I want to just say that we are working on a DSAV training for those Firewise communities on the east side. I know there's probably not a lot on this call, but we will be holding that training in August. And then last but not least, Kate Benton is on tonight. She's our new outreach coordinator. And she'll be working with each of the Firewise communities along with Pat Leach and different outreach events through this next coming year. But I want to welcome her, and we're really excited to have her. She'll be working in an outreach and volunteer coordinator capacity. So she is on the call tonight. She can drop her info in the chat for those of you who want to reach out to her directly. And I think that's all I have.
Great. Kate, want to say hi?
Yes. Hi, I'm Kate Benton. I'm new with Fire Safe Council, and I'm happy to be here. And I can't wait for the rest of the year and all the events and fundraising and everything else that's going to take place. So thank you guys.
Fantastic. Glad to have you on the team, Kate.
Thank you.
And Jamie, always good to hear more resources come into town. Caleb, I know we're giving you time for the presentation later. Did you have any general announcements from the Office of the CEO?
I don't. I can wait. Thank you, Scott.
Okay, cool. One last partner report. So Scott Beasley from this organization stepping aside. Scott Beasley from the California Disaster Airlift Response Team stepping in. We now have a California Disaster Airlift Response Team based out of the Nevada County Airport in Grass Valley. What does that mean? We are now able to operate flights to support some of the efforts within our county who need to transport people and things other places or to bring things in. So as an example, if OES needed a delivery of PPE picked up from some strategic reserve somewhere else, we can mobilize a group of 8 pilots and 12 ground crew to volunteer their own airplanes and fuel to go pick that up. If Patrick Mason has an engine down and needs a part, we might be able to fly to wherever Nevada to go pick that part up for one of his rigs. If the next fire breaks out and they don't pull in a full incident management team like we saw take over the fairgrounds this last week, but maybe they need to transport a meteorologist and a small incident support team of 10 people and bring them in from SoCal, we can go make that happen. And it's very informal. So, I know we're about to hand the mic in a minute to Brian Snyder from Freed, but if there's just, individual transport that we need to do for responders or resources to bring into this community, we can do that as well. And again, it's entirely a volunteer program, just a bunch of people in their planes that want to help all of you in this community. So we're really excited to have that. And it makes our airport just a little bit more, gives it a bit more strategic significance because we are the northernmost group of disaster airlift response teams in California. So we're super excited that they are on board with this program. There will be a press release coming in the week ahead, but we're too busy managing current disasters to announce potential for supporting future disasters. And with that, our partner reports are done. So I'm going to hand it off to OES and Sean Scales. I believe you're leading the debrief for the Rice's fire we had just this past week.
Good evening, everyone. Sean Scales with the Sheriff's Office here in Nevada County. So as you're likely all aware, the Rice's fire began Tuesday afternoon on June 28th and burned just over 900 acres just north of Bridgeport. The initial fire was a structure fire that actually spread to vegetation. Immediately after the event started, CAL FIRE and the Sheriff's Office established unified command and immediately began the initial attack and evacuations. Some of the biggest obstacles were communications. Not only was this fire in a remote area, but it's also bordering another county. And then within the jurisdiction as well, you also had California State Parks. So you've got 3 law enforcement agencies in addition to CAL FIRE all needing to work together, which we're very lucky to have the local partners. Within minutes, I was on the phone with Yuba County. We always work well with CAL FIRE. And we also worked with Cal OES to set up a radio patching system should it become necessary. If the fire had expanded into Yuba County, we would have had interruptibility in our radios. OES and the Sheriff's Office issued multiple code red messages, wireless emergency alerts, and emergency alert system alerts. As the incident expanded, there are, I believe, 4 zones under evacuation order and 5 zones under an evacuation warning. About a total of 340 residents under an evacuation order and 1,445 under an evacuation warning. And this is a good time to remind you that we use multiple systems to alert people during an emergency. So the systems are similar and complementary, but they are different. We've had questions from concerned residents that they received messages that they didn't want to receive, or they didn't receive messages they think they should have received. So code red is based upon a registrant's address where they actually are, while a wireless emergency alert is based off of proximity to the cell tower that's pushing that text-based alert. So they are different systems. And then another system that's available is the code red app. So depending upon how wide you have your radius set for the code red app, if you've got it set to 25 miles, you will receive a lot of alerts that don't necessarily apply to you. And the last system of alerting that we always use is the good old high-low siren. Some of my partners talked to several people who the high-low siren was the first alert that they heard. And we're very lucky that Yuba County and Placer County are two agencies that respond for mutual aid the quickest, also use the high-low siren. So it's a good tool that this community is embracing. We worked with our local stakeholders in the community of North San Juan to set up message boards with printed maps and fact sheets. They're updated twice a day. I believe there was 5 or 7 message boards set up. The Emergency Operations Center opened immediately, and we worked with County Social Services and also Sheriff's Office Animal Control to support evacuees and their pets with messaging and sheltering. A temporary evacuation point was set up at the Madeline Helling Library and served close to 50 residents over 5 days. The fairgrounds was established as an animal evacuation area where they housed close to 150 animals with the assistance of the Nevada County Veterinary Disaster Response Team. And yesterday, about 6:50, I was able to thankfully toggle all the zones back to regular status and send out the last of the code red messages saying that it was all clear up there. There's several destroyed structures and homes that the Sheriff's Office is working on notifying. We're pretty close to notifying all the residents at this time. A local, state, and federal emergency was not declared for this event due to its rural location and lack of significant public damage. PG&E it was an unusual situation because a lot of the residences out there are actually off grid. So there was very little in the way of distribution lines that were destroyed. It was actually transmission lines that were destroyed, but PG&E worked very quickly to reroute power up through Grass Valley after the fire. Initially, they wanted to stop the fire at the Colgate Power Station, and they just couldn't get it done. It swept over the containment line there. So they lost about 13 or 15 poles there that are being replaced as we speak, but power was routed around it, so it wasn't that big a deal. And then the last thing is for the folks who lost their homes, they're working with our 211 Disaster Navigator program to guide themselves through the process as they take on removing all the debris that's down as a result of the fire. That's it, and a report.
We appreciate that. We're going to open it up for questions now. To be clear, questions specific about the Rice's fire. And I'm going to start. You had referenced PG&E. You know, again, technical, you'd referenced distribution versus transmission. Could you explain the difference of that for those of us not familiar with grid structure?
So the lines that are coming to all of our houses, those are going to be your distribution lines. So those are the small lines, whereas the large lines, the big towers and things like that, are transmission lines. So transmission lines typically feed distribution lines.
Got it. So when we heard transmission lines being the big issue, both cause and being knocked out, you know, up in Camp Fire, we're saying we did not lose any of the big ones. We just lost the little lines to the houses. Is that accurate?
Correct. Yeah, they lost about 13 or 15 poles. Whether the actual lines went down, I couldn't tell you, but they're in the process of replacing those lines. And I believe power was out up there for maybe 4 hours or so. They did a pretty good job of routing everything around where it needed to be.
Great. I'm guessing we have a few of you that joined tonight just for the debrief. So this is your chance to ask questions. There we go. I was waiting for it. It's in the chat. How did the fire start?
Unknown. Fire would have to speak to that. I don't have a good idea. It just came out on the computer-aided dispatch as a structure fire that was in danger of spreading to vegetation.
Got it. Got it. We'll have CAL FIRE here next month, and you can hit them with that same question. What else do we have for questions?
Scott, I have a question. Sean, I'm curious, and you probably won't be able to answer this, but it's something my wife and I always talk about. When you talk about there was homes lost at this fire, I'd be real interested to know what the status of their defensible space was. Was it good? Was it bad? Was it, just curious.
I couldn't tell you because it looks a lot different after a fire goes through there than before. I can tell you that in reading the damage assessment report, CAL FIRE specifically noted at least one residence had very good defensible space and there was no damage to the structure as a result. So that's about all I can offer you on that, Jeff.
I'll just add, having sat there for many hours listening to the radios, that fire does announce whether a structure is defensible or not. So they for sure take notice. We have a question. How do code red notices come across?
The code red app. Yeah, I can take that, Scott, and then
Okay.
and let Lieutenant Scales answer the question about looting. So the question is, what's the difference between the Code Red app versus when you're registered? So when you register for Code Red, like we talk about here, you're signing up an email address and a phone number, so that when we send a text message, a phone call, and an email, it'll go to whatever you registered with. That's based on your physical address. So I always give the example of, I live in Lake Wildwood, but if I'm shopping in Nevada City and there's a fire that's threatening Nevada City and they start code redding Nevada City, I won't receive that message because I'm registered in Lake Wildwood, right? That's based off of my physical address where I've registered. But the Code Red app is a tool, and I'll also mention a tool that's not managed by OES. It's managed by OnSolve, the big company that does Code Red, that it's going to follow you around. So you allow your location services. So if I have the Code Red app and I'm registered in Lake Wildwood, but the fire's in Nevada City, and I'm in Nevada City with the Code Red app, it will tell me then, it will alert me to me being in proximity to an active Code Red alert. So people can have it from 1 mile to 20 miles, I guess. I don't use it that way. But you just have to be very cognizant of who that message is, who's sending the message, and who is that message affecting. So whenever we send Code Red messages, we make it very clear this is coming from the Nevada County Sheriff's Office. We list out the zones that are affected by that message. So if you got a message on the app, you should be able to look at it and say, hey, that doesn't affect me. That's not my zone. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And then I'll kick one back to law enforcement. What about trouble with looting? There was one reported incident somewhere. Can you speak to that and how the patrol worked?
Yeah, so basically whenever there's a fire, the area is pretty well flooded with first responder resources. So in this incident, I believe we had up to 10 Placer County deputies and assistants to anybody else locally who was assisting us. We call in our detectives or courthouse folks or anybody else who's extra to come in. We get looting questions all the time. Usually it's pretty, I would say, pretty small in nature from what I've seen. On the river fire, for example, we pulled the stats. I believe there was 1 or 2 burglaries during that time period. And then in the preceding year, same time period, there was actually 3 or 2, about the same, or maybe 1 more than when there was no fire in that same fire footprint. So, you know, it's going to happen. Human nature is what human nature is, but I consider it a pretty small issue. I did see another question. Number of structures lost at the Rice's fire compared to the number saved. I don't really have a way to answer that question. We believe there was a total of 5 structures that have been identified as lost, as well as up to 8 outbuildings. But then again, people's definition of structure differs from person to person, and whether the CAL FIRE damage assessment team can say what something was prior to being consumed by fire, I couldn't tell you.
Thanks. And Melissa, I would also steer you to the recording of our May meeting, which is available on the website. I believe it was Sergeant Dennis Hack went into much greater detail about how patrol works during fire, and that, you know, at any given moment in, you know, an area, especially as rural as this fire was, you're going to have on average about 0 deputies on patrol. Whereas, I mean, Sean, can you speak to how many people were, you know, specifically how many law enforcement vehicles were driving around at any given time in that area during the fire?
At least 10 times what is normal is about average for a fire. For the river fire, for example, that's part of our local beat and also part of beat 2. So we might have a total of 2 deputies in those areas. And during the river fire, we had, you know, dozens of cops in the area. driving around, doing welfare checks, checking on properties, looting calls. The majority of looting calls I've been sent to when working fires have been unfounded. It's neighbors checking on neighbors. It's friends checking on friends that may not be aware, or people outside the fire zone maybe don't know that somebody else has called the neighbor to check on the property. So it's pretty small issue, I believe.
Yeah. And I believe, you guys also had full-time roadblocks set up at the main entry points of Pleasant Valley and other main arteries, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, last call on questions before we move on. All right. Well, thanks for the questions, and Paul and Sean, thanks for being available to get us caught up to speed with what happened at Rice's fire last week. And again, for those of you who came in a little bit late, it looks like CAL FIRE is still on scene with mop-up efforts. We will have them here next month. Should be able to take your questions. So transitioning from the debrief to our main educational content, I am going to hand it over to Coalition Steering Committee member Susan Rogers to talk about how to stay informed during an actual emergency. Susan?
Okay. Sharing my screen here, and get this out of the way and get this out of the way. We have changed. I'm going to talk about our how to stay updated and know what to do and figure out what's going on during an actual fire, since we just had one. The education resources page has been renamed to Learn What to Do, Education Resources. And so you'll always see that over here in the left-hand side, Learn What to Do, Education Resources. And right here, how to stay informed during a wildfire season. We've updated that. And here's how to sign up for Code Red and all of the rest of it. And I have put in a new item here, how to sign up for CAL FIRE text alerts, because that was the second alert that I got, the first one being from the Union newspaper, which is also listed on here. And I'm going to do a little show and tell to tell you how I learned about the fire and how I figured out what was going on once I got the alerts. Right here, this has always been on this page. The Union can, right here, sorry about this, text from breaking news from the Union. You can send these words, Union News, to this number. And that's the first way I learned about the fire, was I got a text from the Union. I clicked on the link in that text and I got a page with scanner stuff on it, like audio, and I can never understand that. I'm hoping that now with the new website platform that they're going to go to at the Union, that they will be able to improve that. But that's the first notice that I got. The second notice I got about 15 minutes later was from CAL FIRE. And so this is new on this document. So even if you already have this document, and all you Firewise representatives out there in your communities, you should be making sure that you send out to your email list that we've updated this, is you can go to CAL FIRE, and if I click on that right here, get text messages on wildfire incidents near you. Then you click on that. And right here in this box, sign up for text messages. You put your cell phone number in here, you put your zip code in here, and you click sign up. And that was the second notice that I got about the fire. I've already signed up my husband just by putting all this in the box for him. I'm going to sign up my mother and my sister who live next door, and then I'm going to tell them that I signed them up. And I'm going to do that for two of my neighbors too, who are on my buddy list. So that is now on here under sign up for CAL FIRE text alerts. And let me show you a couple other things that people referenced during our call today, or rather it's on our website here, Learn What to Do. There is the Code Red Explainer, the difference between the app, the Code Red app, which the county has nothing to do with, but the Code Red Emergency Alert System, which the county puts out. We've got a 2-page PDF here, which we covered in a previous meeting. And it's got a chart and a grid and all kinds of stuff. But if you're trying to figure out the difference between the app and the county system, this will give you an eye what to do, how to do that. Here's your sign up for text alerts from CAL FIRE again on the web page. I previously showed it to you on the handout, and it is in both places now. And then we've got a couple of other things on here, but let me show you what I did when I learned about the fire first from a text from the union. I clicked on that, it didn't help me much. Then I got one from CAL FIRE. So what did I do then? I immediately went to ubinet.com and you click on happening now. If you click on fire news, it's going to be a whole page about all the fires in California, and it's going to be very confusing. And for the longest time, I used to think, why do people tell everybody to go to Ubinet? I just can't figure it out. Well, it's because I would always go into fire news. You have to go to happening now. And she always has something about the fire. And once it becomes a big fire, she'll put something on here and she'll make an entire page. When I say she, I'm referring to Pascal Fusola, who's the editor here and publisher at Pascal, and she'll make a whole page on the fire. So I clicked on that and I saw like, oh yeah, there's a fire. So then what did I do? I have the dashboard right here bookmarked on my Chrome browser. So it says fire. On a Chrome browser, you can choose a certain number of bookmarks to show in your browser. The fourth one down here is the dashboard. So I went to the dashboard. This was all within 10, 15 minutes of my getting my text from the union and then getting the text from CAL FIRE. So I went to the dashboard and I was like, oh, okay, you have to accept the cookies here. And I zoomed in. And at that point, right now, all the evacuation zones are gone. But at the time, I was able to see where the evacuation zones were. And in fact, here's the ones up here that are cleared. And so that's how I was able to tell where it was. And then what I always do next is I go right here to current weather. And I saw which way the wind was blowing. I live in downtown Grass Valley, not downtown, but I live in Brunswick within the Grass Valley city limits. And so I could see that the wind was blowing in this direction. I think the little arrows kind of show on your screen there. And so I was immediately able to tell that the wind was blowing away from me. So that means I didn't have to panic, didn't have to go rushing in my car. I didn't have to be one of the 12 people who texted Virginia Gompertz, the secretary of the coalition here, to say, should we be evacuating? Virginia lives in Lake Wildwood. These people, all her neighbors and such, texted her to say, should we be evacuating? Okay, you don't have to be one of those people bothering Virginia if you know how to do this. So you just go to the current weather thing and it shows you which way the wind is blowing. Does that mean you can be complacent? No, the wind can change at any time. And so you have to keep an eye on it, but this will give you an idea of how, like, you don't have to panic right at the moment, and you can inform your friends and neighbors that there is a fire. So I made some phone calls and I kept my eye on it over the next few days, but I was able to tell exactly where it was. And then I kept going back over here to the dashboard itself. And it was telling me, once this little thing will disappear, and then you see this, how much is it contained, et cetera, and so on. And then over here, even if you don't use Twitter, you can keep an eye on the Twitter feed, which I discovered in the Jones fire is the fastest way to get information. And so OES retweets everything from CAL FIRE or the sheriff's office as soon as they get it. And so you can sort of get a Twitter feed without even getting Twitter by coming to the dashboard here and looking at this. And then this is another way you can keep your eye on it and go back or forth. But basically the top one will always be the most recent. And so that's my little show and tell of how I stayed informed on the Firewise community, or rather on the Rice's fire. And again, right here under best of the best, you get how to stay informed during wildfire seasons, during an actual wildfire, pardon me. Print this out, put it on your refrigerator, tell all your friends about it, and all you Firewise community representatives need to make sure that this new one gets pushed out to all your email list. So that's it, Scott. Thank you, and back to you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing our attention back to that, Susan. And, you know, many of you hear me saying this every month, but you get to hear me say it again this month, that, you know, many of you are sitting back saying, you know, I know all this stuff, I've heard it before. You know, I would just challenge you, are you doing it? And are you sharing it with your neighbors? So every fire we have, there are people who light up social media looking at the Zone Haven map, saying, I don't understand what this is. I can't see any of the major roads. Or, what is cryptic was one of the words used. Why is this map so cryptic? It needs to be more clear. The purpose of that zone haven is pretty straightforward. It's for you to look to see if your zone is lit up for evacuation. And if not, are you close to a zone that is, where maybe you want to pay a little extra special attention? So, while I'm quite certain everyone in this meeting is very comfortable and does know their zone, you might have some neighbors that aren't as active in the community that you are. Maybe they're not as tech savvy as you are. So, as we move into fire season here, please reach out and share this with people and share those resources that Susan put out in front of you.
And Scott, if I can say one more thing, for people who don't have the dashboard bookmarked, it's really easy to remember. ReadyNevadaCounty.org, and you should have Ready Nevada County memorized, because that is the theme, basically. That is what it's all about here in terms of being fire prepared. ReadyNevadaCounty.org, but .com would also get you there, so don't worry about that. /dashboard. ReadyNevadaCounty.org/dashboard, and it'll take you right to the dashboard, even if you don't have a bookmarked.
Good stuff. Thanks, Susan. All right. So the next resource we have for you tonight is Brian Snyder. He is the Freed Emergency Services Coordinator. Freed, for those of you not familiar with it, is one of our local nonprofits. Their mission is to promote independence and self-determination for people with disabilities through person-driven services, collaborative community partnerships, and education and leadership that advocates for fully inclusive communities. Brian is, again, the Emergency Services Coordinator, and he is here tonight to share some tips and lessons for disaster and access resources for seniors. So, Brian, thanks so much for being with us at our meeting tonight. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting Freed, Scott. We really appreciate it. Like Scott said, I'm Freed's Emergency Preparedness Coordinator. And so to give you an idea of how my program works is it's funded through a grant by PG&E. And PG&E basically funds the main contractor, which is California Foundation for Independent Living Centers, which we are a member of, and we are the subcontractor. And it's under a program called Disability Disaster Access and Resources Program. And Freed is a Disability Disaster Access and Resources Center. So what I primarily do is coordinate basically backup power solutions for those that have life-sustaining medical devices or durable medical equipment. So this is like CPAP machines, oxygen concentrators, power wheelchairs, etc. And so what we've been doing since 2019 is deploying batteries like Yeti 3000 batteries up to 6000X batteries, and to power those types of medical devices. We also help people maintain temperature control as well for conditions like multiple sclerosis and so on. We also offer hotel accommodations and Visa debit cards to pay for fuel for generators. And of course, you have to have some type of medical device or require a medical need for temperature control. And on top of that, everything else, what I do is help people create personal emergency preparedness plans. And so, I mean, we've been dealing with this for a while now. And one of the things that I talked to Scott about is one of the main issues is, I'm sorry, what happens is every time something goes up in the chat, my screen reader starts talking, so it's distracting. So I apologize, but I am blind if you're unaware of that. So that is one of my disabilities. And so, but one of the things that Scott and I were talking about, he was asking, like, what are the main issues for older adults and people with disabilities? And within our county, it's really, people do not have 5 trusted allies that they can contact in emergency. Many people do not. As Paul has mentioned in the past, we have over 3,000 miles of road in this county. And there's a lot of people out in the middle of nowhere that are on oxygen, have COPD, that don't have any family or friends, and they're very, very, very isolated. And being with our current economic situation, where food prices and gas prices are going up, people are forced into even greater poverty. And so personal emergency preparedness is really a privilege. And within my program, I work with a wide variety of low income all the way up to high income, because we don't have any income limitations within the program. But what I notice is that those that have a lot of money are very, very, very well prepared with backup generators, and also just having a go bag. And so people that do not have money, they're trying to just basically meet their basic needs, food, etc. And so there's a lot of people that just, and plus they have chronic health conditions, so they're not thinking about, they're just trying to get through the day basically and survive. And so what it's interesting, Scott was talking about, Freed being an independent living center. And one of the things that is happening within the independent living movement, which Freed is a part of, is that taking away the word independent, because it's really about, especially now with climate change and the multiple crises that we are all facing together, it's really about interdependence and helping each other to get through these crises, because it's not just one, it's usually multiple. So and being flexible and adaptive to them as well. So that is something that we're constantly thinking about. And the thing that I think about all the time, and I've mentioned it to Paul and Sean many, many times, is the idea that there's a lot of people that just do not have the resources. They don't have the social networks to be able to, go somewhere if they have to evacuate. If you have money, you can go to a hotel. But some people don't have family and friends. So what we encourage people to do is reach out, start talking to their neighbors, acquaintances, if they belong to a religious organization or social group, start networking and start saying, hey, I'm alone. How can I help you during a disaster? These are my needs, and so on. To start at least having those conversations, so that people are better prepared. I think when we started this program, I was hearing constantly, when I asked the question, do you have 5 trusted allies? People would say no. And some people would start crying and just instantly just start losing it, because they realized how alone they are. And there are many, many people in this county that are very, very, very alone. So what, it's so important, I think, not only for people with access and functional needs or older adults and so on, but everybody to reach out to their neighbors and just introduce themselves. So, at least everybody's within each other's minds. And so, Scott, I don't know if that's everything you wanted me to cover, but I'm happy to discuss anything if anybody has any questions, or, but I think that's what we had previously discussed.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, Brian. You referenced reaching out to others. We heard a year ago during our early warning systems the story of Natalia from, I believe she's in like Wildwood, who is 90% deaf without her hearing aids, which she does not sleep with. So everyone in her neighborhood, everyone on her block knew, where her house was, which specific room was her bedroom, and which, window to really, really bang on to wake her up in the event of an emergency. And, sometimes we can get bogged down in the technology and the acronyms, and sometimes it's as simple as that. So, please reach out to your neighbors, hear what Brian's saying, that not everyone is prepared and as fortunate as we are. And, pair that with what we heard, I believe it was just last month, from Colleen Milligan, the forensic anthropologist, going through victim stories and that, fire victim patterns, and that the people we often lose are elderly, are without means, do have a disability. So please reach out for others in your neighborhood.
Yeah, the statistic is that 70% of people that die in disasters are people with disabilities. That's a high number.
Unfortunate.
And if you look at, if you look at video during Hurricane Katrina of those that were in assisted living facilities with water up to their necks, that's a really good example.
Horrible to hear, but sobering and something we do need to hear. Brian, I'm gonna not I'm not call it by its proper name, but you had referenced that you sometimes do individualized response plans or
Yeah,
help me
I
out.
do try. I mean, it's part of the program is helping people create personal emergency preparedness plans. And I mean, really what it is an overview. And I ask people to think about these things because, to be honest, I mean, it's in my experience since working on this since 2019, it's gotten, people are more prepared in general. But in the beginning in 2019, I was hearing people crying, just asking the question, do you have 5 trusted allies? People would just start sobbing and saying, I don't have anybody. And so, yes, that's one of the things we work on. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, that was it. I was just curious, and again, specific to the individual plans, like what do you do when you work with your clients for, fire preparedness?
In general, we review the 4 steps of the Least Dose California campaign, which is finding 5 trusted allies, have a list of your medications and medical devices, going through what is in a go bag or emergency supply kit, and knowing escape routes. And then I've also added, basically asking everyone to do a practice run as if they get a call from OES so that they have to evacuate in 30 minutes, and just doing a test run at least once during the season so that there's a little bit of muscle memory, because I had to evacuate last year. It wasn't necessary, but I did it anyway. And it really showed my strengths and weaknesses in terms of evacuation readiness. So, and the other thing that people, I mean, if you're able-bodied, it's much, much easier. If one has a disability, whether it be cognitive or physical, it requires more time to evacuate, especially if there's severe mobility issues. If somebody uses a power wheelchair or is quadriplegic or whatnot, that requires a lot more time and a lot more planning. So I try to think through these things, and it's really ultimately it's up to we call our those that we work with, consumers. It's up to the consumer to make the final decision, and I just basically try to present the situation. And also I have to also balance everything out, because I can hear if people are really scared or upset or don't want to hear it. And so I have to manage that, because there's all different levels of emotional states that I have to work with in order to get through this and to serve them.
Well, we have one question in the chat, but it's pretty specific to your program. So Brian, if you're able to check that out, great. If not, Alice, I'm going to ask you to reach out to Brian directly. And if you don't have his contact info, we can provide that for you. But Brian, she's asking, she's a volunteer with the Telephone Assurance Program and is asking for a worksheet. So
Scott, I wonder if Alice is asking us if we have a worksheet. Let's see.
Oh. Yeah, Alice, can you unmute and heave that question out?
Yeah, actually, my question was for Brian.
Okay.
What he would suggest, actually, and even working with our neighbors, how do we work through this? How do we help them to have an emergency plan?
Are you talking about people you know or people you don't know?
Well, people that I know that I make phone calls to, I can work with them, but neighbors, I may not know yet, but is it just a matter of ready, set, go?
Alice, are you aware of the booklet, Ready Nevada County, Ready, Set, Go, that comes in the mail every year?
Yeah.
That is I would say, and Paul, you can chime in here too, but that's your basic structure for what everybody needs to know. It's even got a page where you can fill in who your 5 buddies would be, and where you plan to go, so that you can tell your relatives, this is where I'll be, and that sort of thing. So all your basic structure information is in that booklet. They did a great job. It gets
I agree with Susan.
Cool. Yeah, great question, Alice. And again, want to thank Brian for his time and for what you do for our community. We appreciate you being here on this meeting and being here in Nevada County.
Thank you for inviting Fareed, Scott. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course, of course. So I apologize to all involved. I have to step out of this meeting to move into my next nonprofit fire debrief with a different organization. So I'm going to hand the meeting off to Coalition Vice Chair Nick Johnson to introduce the next topic and our next speaker. So Nick, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So Caleb Dardick's with us from the County Executive Office. If you can remember back, if you attended the the May coalition meeting, Caleb did a presentation about priorities, looking for input on those, on what we should be focusing on. So Caleb's here to talk about the next steps, what he's gathered and how this is moving forward and progressing to move forward. So Caleb, over to you.
All right, thank you, Nick. And can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Firewise Coalition, and just leadership to get, over 100 people on the call month after month. People, I just really commend all of you for being part of such a great grassroots organization that's keeping all of our communities safe. And I just also, just want to echo the earlier comments of appreciation to CAL FIRE and all the first responders who worked so quickly to get the Rice's Crossing blaze out. Really speaks to fire season just keeps earlier and earlier. So what we want to talk with you tonight is so much of what we do in the Firewise Coalition in our meetings is focusing on readiness now, right? For what can we do now? What can we do on the personal level, the individual level, pack our go bags, code red, all that sort of thing. And so I want to pick up on the conversation we've been having really now for a couple of years, which is all of you as stakeholders and being people who are very knowledgeable about the emergency services needs and gaps in our community. What should we continue to focus on at the county level, the big priorities that will make our community safer so that we can live here and know that we're making progress towards making our community safer. So I'm going to share a brief PowerPoint, about a dozen slides, and hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A as well. And my contact information I'll add into the chat. So people want to continue offline with me as well. So as Nick said, I'm working for the county. I'm working in the CEO's office, supporting the Board of Supervisors policy priorities, of which wildfire is one of their top priorities, and emergency preparedness. So I will start sharing. All right, Nick, can you see my screen, the slide?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so this is building upon Ready Nevada County, preparing for the future, talking about prioritization and how do we develop sustainable solutions. So make sure everything is working. All right, so I think what is really changed in the last couple of years, I've grown up in Nevada County since the early 70s. We've always had fire here. It's the sort of the concentration of just one thing after another. And of course, this is related to climate change and so many issues about how we've managed our lands, but wildfire, giant snowstorms like last year, prolonged drought. We're in a situation where we have to be thinking about emergency preparedness in the broadest sense, floods, extreme weather, heat. And so I encourage us to be thinking beyond wildfire when we have these conversations. Clearly, those of you, many of us were impacted by the winter storm. Some people, were without power for up to 14 days. This was a tremendous wake-up call in terms of evacuation issues and to the issues that Brian was talking about in terms of getting support to our most vulnerable residents. It was definitely, definitely a pretty intense storm, and it's not unforeseeable that this would happen again. I have a slide here that shows a wheel of fires going back to 1932. And basically the point is that 7 of the most destructive fires in California history have happened in the last 2 years. And that's particularly relevant to all of us, since 92% of us live in high severity fire zones. So again, we're challenged to take action and to focus on how do we mitigate these type of events. So we have been listening to the community and our staff. We've been coming to you. Staff has been engaged with the coalition for years, working with the Fire Safe Council, community groups, stakeholders of all kinds, and in particularly the last couple of months, engaging stakeholders in fire at the municipal level with our 2 cities in town, and sheriff's office and many other first responders and community groups. And one of the question we've been asking is, what are your priorities? And the other question is, what are the sustainable solutions that we're going to need? And of course, a big focus has been on grants. And I think those of you who have been regular to these calls know we've been very successful at the county level and the community level in bringing in state and federal funding in the millions. However, grant cycles are cyclical. It's not something you can count on. It's not necessarily sustainable, and also requires a local match. So much of the work that we need to do in Nevada County is about reducing the threat and reducing the fuel load, and that sort of work requires sustainable ongoing solutions. How do you pay for it? We've looked at all sorts of things, grants, different type of assessments, parcel taxes. And what we have as a staff level, what we are preparing and what I want to share with you tonight, really a preview, and the first full preview with this group, is a concept around a proposed sales tax measure. And so it's important that the sales tax measure have a very clear goal. And if you can see this slide, I'll read it for those of you who might not be able to see it. The proposed measure is designed to be responsive to the community's priorities to save lives, reduce the threat of wildfires, and improve all hazards disaster readiness and evacuation safety. So we all know that Nevada County is not necessarily immune to the type of catastrophic fires we've seen all over the state. Paradise is in this photo, but any number of the others are not different. And so the measure would be focused primarily on removing flammable brush countywide, removing them along evacuation routes from our neighborhoods, cities and towns, near critical public infrastructure. And I'll dig a little deeper into each. So all of you who've been thinking about this issue, and it's come up tonight, evacuation safety. And so a big part of evacuation safety is removing the flammable fuels that are close to the side of the roads. This is key, of course, so that residents can get out quickly in an emergency and first responders can get in. We've had a survey that's still ongoing, and I will encourage all of you at the end. I'll give you the link to participate in the survey if you haven't. But we're getting more than 50% of the respondents are actually taking the time to write to write a statement about their priority. And these little quotes at the bottom here, it's a little small to read perhaps, but it says, "I live on a dead end road, only one way in and out. How do you plan for that? The fires go so fast, you might not get an evacuation warning fast enough." So, these type of issues, how do we work to make our major county roads safe? How do we work with Firewise groups like yours to identify and prioritize all the interconnected routes so that we create a network that gets people out safely? So certainly working on evacuation safety is going to be a big theme of this measure. The other is, unfortunately, there are a number of people in our community, unhoused people who are forced for a variety of reasons to live in the woods, and we want to help them and work closely with them. But certainly during fire season, red flag days, illegal campfires pose a severe threat. This is something we know. We've seen it happen. The 1988, the 49er fire? We know was caused, by a small campfire that got out of control. That was a transient camp. So we are looking to create resources to support really the partnership of law enforcement and social services to get out, to engage with these unhoused people, help them get the services they need, help them get into more sustainable housing, and reduce the threat. Nevada County, as Brian was mentioning, is a large disabled population, a large population of seniors, many people on fixed incomes. Any of us, all of us who have done this type of mitigation work around our homes, we know how expensive this is. I've had a tree, trees actually removed by crane and lifted over my home. And that's a type of expense that not everyone can afford by a long shot. And so we are seeking and have sought state and federal assistance for low-income seniors and people with disabilities or access and functional needs. But again, those programs are not sustainable right now as grants. We would like to see a certain amount of monies available to augment that and be available, between grants, as well as assist with match requirements that many of these state and federal grants bring along. A big piece that we heard about, especially after Stormageddon, this winter storm, was, hey, where do we take all of this green waste that's fallen on our property? And I know that the county, with CAL FIRE support and many partners, Fire Safe Council, great effort, huge community effort, had over a dozen, I think it was nearly a dozen free green waste drop-off days. And I don't think I've ever seen so many thank yous come through to the county, but with another message was, wouldn't it be great if this was year round? And when you think about the effort that people have taken to cut up the brush on their own property, load it into their own vehicle, I think meeting the community sort of halfway by having a free drop-off point is a perfect example of that sort of public-private partnership. So we'd like to see green waste drop-off sites in both East and West County, more neighborhood chipping programs, so we can really bolster that effort so waiting lists are shorter, and more local hand crews. We also see a huge opportunity in this fuel reduction for economic development, workforce development, because there's no reason we can't have good paying jobs as we in our economy to do this important work. Another big piece is the measure, and this is something that people really seem to understand in Nevada County, is that with the state and federal funding, being able to go after these grants, to manage the contracts, to find the match, whether it's 20 or 25%, is a key piece to our success. And those of you who are aware of the Ponderosa project, this was a CAL FIRE funded project administered by the county and implemented by the Fire Safe Council. Incredible first phase in light yellow, just completed in March. So many people to applaud for that work, not least of which is the 200 or more homeowners who agreed to have this work done and have committed to maintain the property for the next 10 years and hopefully in perpetuity. So we want to see resources that provide that match fund, that provide the maintenance support, because we know these large scale fuel breaks need to be maintained, but that they will make a difference. We heard Chief Asst of CAL FIRE say just the other day that these fuel breaks are essential in terms of slowing the speed and intensity of wildfire. And in green, you'll see a phase 2, which is being funded as well with both state and federal monies and will be implemented shortly. But this is really just the beginning. This map, I'm not going to go into each of these projects, but there's at least 8 other projects in Western Nevada County alone, and probably about 9,000 acres of projects in Eastern Nevada County. And of course, they have to be done. They have to be done in partnership with the community and the homeowners, and then they of course need to be maintained in perpetuity so we don't lose the investment. Big piece of the work that we talk about at these Firewise Coalition meetings is defensible space. Right now we have a great program, and we know that every time we reach somebody with either advisory visits through the Fire Safe Council or with the the inspectors from the county, that education pays off. 70–90% of the people who are contacted do the right thing, make the improvements to their property. So more resources for education, inspection, enforcement, and in worst cases, abatement. And as I mentioned earlier, also grants to low-income seniors and people with disabilities who need assistance in managing their properties so they can stay and live safely on their property. So we're calling this tentatively, this is a proposed wildfire prevention, emergency services, and disaster readiness measure. It would focus on mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. So this wheel is probably familiar to any of you who've seen this sort of FEMA wheel, which is that emergency management is not just responding to the fire or even recovering from the fire. It's the mitigation work. It's the preparedness, prevention, and planning work. And all of that cycle needs to be funded with sustainable resources. So diving a bit into the details of this concept, this is envisioned as a 0.5-cent sales tax. Based on current projections, it would provide about $12 million a year. These would be locally controlled funds that could not be taken away by the state. It would have a citizen oversight process and committee appointed by the board. There would be regular audits to ensure transparency and accountability, and many other protections to make sure that every dollar got spent the way we want it to. So we are still in the fact-finding process. That's not over. We're going to go a couple more weeks. So if you could take this survey at readynevadacounty.org/future, we're about 800 responses so far. And there's 2 questions. The first question in this graphic sort of shows you how it's playing out so far is ranked voting. We want you to, a ranked choice. Tell us in your order what you think are the most important things the county should be focused on. And the second question is open-ended. What do you personally think? And that's where I've been so impressed by the responses we've gotten so far. So please go readynevadacounty.org/future. If you haven't done it, do that in the next week or so would be greater. Do it tonight would be ideal. So this proposed measure has been put together by staff with a great deal of consultation with community leaders, with first responders, with our partners, with our cities. I think you saw that the priorities there are, reflective of what people think will move the needle, make the biggest difference. And so this will be presented to the Board of Supervisors. The vote that the board has to make is yes or no about placing it on the November ballot and giving the citizens, giving all of you a choice. Is this something that we want to do? So if you want to let the supervisors know how you feel, it will take place Tuesday, August 9th. It's scheduled for time certain, 1:30 p.m. at the Rood Center. There are options to phone in. And then, of course, you can always email a letter at this email, BOS, which stands for Board of Supervisors, .publiccomment@co.nevada.ca.us. And the measure and all of the staff reports will all be published when the agenda comes out the Thursday at noon the week before. So I encourage you to read that as well. But if we're on track, if this is responsive to the coalition and to your Firewise groups, if you want more information, please reach out to me. We're happy. We have a full team of people who will come speak to community groups. I think we've spoken to over a dozen Firewise groups already. Look forward to doing more. And if this is responsive and on track, let the Board of Supervisors know that you want them to put it on the ballot, because that is the decision that needs to be made on the 9th. And with that, I will stop sharing, and I'm happy to take any questions.
So Caleb, thank you very much. So there's been monitoring chat here. There's one question that has not been addressed, and that is, if I find it again, it has to do with evacuation routes. Would funding for this be available for private or only public roads for evacuation routes? Could you answer that question?
Absolutely. So what we want to do is definitely make sure that we get ahead of the county roads, the county maintained roads. The county, as you know, has about 600 miles of roads. And right now we're on a fuel reduction cycle of about 8 to 11 years before we hit them all again. It's been a little bit better in the last couple of years because we've had some CAL FIRE grants to help out, but that means we've been doing about 50 to 80 miles per year. So we want to get to a 3 to 5 year schedule and make sure that that's built in, that the county roads are fully cleared, and that we're seeing that not on a pace of 8 to 11 years, but on a pace of 3 to 5 years. But what we'd also like to see is having grant monies available, a fund available to the community where Firewise groups can partner with the county and, work on removing fuels. And we're going to really look to the genius of the community to come up with that, but perhaps more chipper programs, more green waste, more ways to support you, because we realize that in Nevada County, 1,500 miles of county roads are privately owned. And so, having the capacity to go in and just do all 2,000, right? The 1,500 plus the 500 is way beyond what this fund could do. But I really believe it can provide resources to work with neighborhood groups to make the job easier, right? Help get the waste out, chip it up. As I said with the green waste disposal site, the ideas of meeting the community halfway in partnership. So the details of how the funding will work in terms of it will go through the regular Board of Supervisors budget process. We'll have a technical advisory committee of stakeholders in law enforcement, emergency response, who will develop a budget every year. And that will prioritize, in those 4 categories I mentioned of mitigation, response, recovery, and planning preparedness. And but I definitely think, and I think everyone agrees, that we really need to have a fund where we can partner with the community. And there's just so many great examples, like the Greenhorn Firewise group, sought ARPA money and got a grant for ARPA money to pay for water storage tanks, emergency storage tanks. But then they're finding the land, developing the easements, partnering with the consolidated fire to maintain it. Fire Marshal Patrick Mason's been a big part of that. So those are, those are the type of things we want to be able to encourage.
So another question that came in here was, again, just to reiterate, the board, the supervisory board, this is just to place it on the ballot, correct?
That's correct. The decision on August 9th is yes or no to put it before the voters in November. So the board has the authority to put items on the ballot, and then it will be up to the voters to decide if this is something they want to do.
Okay, so there's one last final question that I need to move on to an order of business on this subject, and that is, what is the projected amount to derive from the sales tax?
Right. So again, I think I showed it on one of the slides. Half-cent sales tax, we believe, would generate $12 million per year. And we think that, managed wisely and also leveraging state and federal monies, we could see a multiplier effect of several fold. But 12, it depends on the economy, obviously, whether it goes up or down. But right now we're on track with a projection of 12 million per year.
Okay, great.
Nick, excuse me, there's one more question. Would the funds be available only to low-income seniors or all low-income residents? Would landlords be eligible for the funds? So
again, there's a lot of projects that we want to do. If you're speaking specifically about a portion of the funds supporting access and functional need grants for low-income seniors and people with disabilities, that would be at this point, at least the state and federal programs, I believe, have a restriction, an income restriction and a match.
Okay, I think we have one time for one more question. And I think there's actually 2 in here. And one is, can I ask a question? And I think we need to ask, I do have to get on to an order of business here. And there's one here is, how much does a 50 mile of county road clearance cost? And I think that is dependent upon what county road we're talking about, and how much work it has to be done. But everybody, you can see Caleb's correct email address. Or is this is your email address, right, Caleb?
Yeah, just put it in, caleb.dardick@co.nevada.ca.us. And especially for those of you who are leaders of a Firewise group, if you want to have me and other people come and meet in a smaller group or Zoom, however you want, we're really happy to do so. And yeah, questions about what it costs per mile. I mean, we have estimates and data on all that.
Right. Well, Caleb, thank you for your time, and thank you for all your work. I think, this, even though we're running into tough times in the economy right now, tougher times could be had with more fires, and this is, there's never a good time for this. So what I need to ask the coalition is, Caleb has approached the coalition staff and asked us to attend the Board of Supervisors meeting in support of placing this on the ballot in November. For us to do that, our bylaws require that we take a vote of our Firewise communities with a 2/3 majority. So only a Firewise community only has one vote. So if you're here representing it, a Firewise community, please cast that vote. And I'm going to try to do this the most expeditious way so that we have some time, free time for open questions. So what I would ask, that one vote for the Firewise communities that are attending this meeting. Is there any naysayers that they would not want the coalition staff to support this at the Supervisors Board meeting in August? And if you feel free to put that in text now. Okay, so not having seen any, I'm going to take that as that we have the 2/3 majority here to move forward with the coalition supporting this Board of Directors of placing this initiative on the November ballot.
Oh, it's nice to see the thumbs up. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for all your time. So with that, there was one question here. I'll just go ahead and read it. I'll open it up to questions. How do you expect us to speak on behalf of the Firewise Council? We just learned about it. So again, Caleb, and we just put an address in there where the Firewise councils themselves can take a letter of support or not to the Board of Directors, however they may want to. What the coalition is going to do is speak just based upon what we have about putting it on the agenda for November. I think there's a lot more talk that will have if we officially come out or officially don't when it actually comes to a ballot measure. And I don't think we're there at that time.
Yeah, and Nick, can I speak to Lisa's question? Lisa asked, how do you expect us to speak on behalf of our Firewise community when we just learned of it? Well, if you haven't had any kind of conversations with the members of your Firewise communities, with them, hearing them express their opinions about what they think needs to be done in the county, then right, you may have a hard time voting for an authorization to authorize the coalition officers to go to the meeting and say, yeah, put it on the ballot. But there are a lot of Firewise communities, and especially for people who have been the community directors or coordinators for a long time. For the newer people, maybe not so much that you've had the communication, but if you've been a Firewise community coordinator for a long time, you may have heard a lot of your members saying, oh my gosh, we need to do this, we need to do that, there's no money, I wish the county could get the money, I wish the county could help us do this and that or the other thing, I wish there was money to do it. And then if you've had those conversations and you've heard that sort of comment from your members, then you can feel confident voting for it. So it's kind of a spectrum of what you might know about in terms of what you've heard from your members. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, with that, I'm gonna.
Nick, I would just like to say one thing, in that ultimately the voters will decide. So just because we're saying this is a good idea, I think it is a good idea. We have to do something about the fuels in this county and clear the roads and all of the above. So that, if you're worried about, we're not asking you to vote for the thing right now. We're just asking you to say, look, let's push this forward and get it out to the public and let the voters decide. I mean, that's going to be the final say. So anyways.
Good point, Jeff. Thanks.
Agreed. Thank you. Okay, with that, we have 5 minutes left. Is there any other questions that you'd like to pose in chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask those questions?
I would just like to make one comment in that the thing I like about a sales tax, nobody likes taxes, I get that, but a sales tax is covered. I mean, tourists that come to town spend money, and that money, you know, will be taxed, so to speak, versus a property tax where it's just the property owner. So just saying that the tourism will help, you know, do a lot of the funding for this.
Okay,
Pennies, I call it pennies for prevention. That would be my personal slogan, pennies for prevention on every purchase.